Okay, welcome back. It was time for a new coffee table in the living room. So I found some great wormy curly maple at the local place where I get my wood for my projects. I got the whiteboard out first and I'm putting the dimensions of the components here. The legs ended up being a little bit different than this, and it led to the aprons being a little bit different dimensions, or the length ended up being a little bit different, but you'll see that in the video. So here we go. All this wood came with two pretty good faces and at least one pretty good edge, so I started off by just cutting off the raw ends. The width of the tabletop was going to be 54 inches, but I cut all these to 54 and a half just in case to give myself a little room to work with. Next, I just kind of looked at all the faces, looked for any spots that were going to need attention later, and I marked off one side with the crayon so that when I was jointing, I would know if I had a nice flat surface. Just jointing the boards here to get one good edge so we can take it over to the table saw and cut them down to width. You can see that some of these pieces, this piece I'm particularly working with right here, had kind of a bad edge. And so all of the pieces of the tabletop were a little bit of a different width, but that's okay. I kind of like that look actually. So here I'm just kind of keeping as much good wood as I can and getting rid of the bad spots on the opposite edge that I just jointed. Again, luckily, all of these pieces had at least one pretty good flat side, so I just skip planed these. Originally, I had planned on making the tabletop about 1 inch thick, but this was 5/4 stuff, so I had more than that. And so I just planed these down as much as I needed. And so the tabletop ended up being thicker than 1 inch. About here's where I recognized that I didn't actually need that extra ½ inch, so that's okay. No harm, no foul. I put it on 54 inches and cut them down to size. And right here is where you lay out all the pieces of your tabletop and you position them where you think it looks good, and then you move it about 50 times. And to be honest, I don't even remember if at the end of this clip that's what I went with. But this is the general process. You question yourself a lot. I decided to use biscuits to join all the pieces of the tabletop together. I don't want to pay for a festool or anything like that, so I've had this Harbor Freight biscuit joiner forever now and it works fine. After that, it's your standard glue up. I don't know why I do it this way, but I really like just gluing up one piece of these at a time. It kind of makes it a little easier to work with. So I know everybody probably just puts all these pieces in there and does one big glue up, but I guess I'm just kind of weird like that. So here's the whole tabletop glued up. Scraping glue is annoying, but whatever. Okay, so each leg was going to be 2 inches by 4 1/4. So I cut these down to length, and then I planed each piece down to 1 inch, and then I glued 2 of those together to get the 2 inches. The 4 1/4 ended up being a little bit shorter than that because I had one piece that wasn't quite wide enough. Hence why I said earlier that the legs were a little bit different dimension. Again, they ended up being a little bit less wide than 4 1/4. And so I just made up the difference when I cut the aprons. And here I'm just doing the same process as I did for each piece of the tabletop, jointing one edge, taking it to the table saw, cutting it to width, and then planing it down to the thickness I wanted before gluing it up. I forgot to mention that when I was cutting the raw lumber down to length for these legs, the legs were going to be 15 inches. I definitely did give myself an extra 1/2 or 3/4 inch, I can't remember, to work with, because when you glue these up, they aren't always flush, the 2 pieces that are going to make up each leg. So then you can just take it to the miter saw, cut the very edge off of one, and then you have a nice flat side to cut them down to the exact length. Once the glue up was done, I treated them like any other raw piece of lumber that I was going to square up. So I jointed them and planed them accordingly. The good thing about these legs being as thick as they are is that you can use the planer to get them down to width rather than taking them over to the table saw and having to crank your blade up real high. And this piece right here was just not quite wide enough. You can see I'm getting it out and measuring it and realizing that it's going to be a little bit short of 4¼ but that's okay. Again, I just made up all the difference when I cut the aprons to length. So does anybody else clean as they go, or do y'all just wait until the very end, clean it all up at once, or do you just leave your shop all messy? I've always wondered that. Put it in the comments. Now we're just sanding all this down. I'm sanding these with 120 grit right here, by the way. However, with the tabletop, I started with 80. So I first ended with 80 and then I did 120 grit. So after thinking about it, I thought the 3 inches was going to be too far for the aprons to come down from the tabletop. So I decided to adjust this to 2¼ inches. So for the aprons, I just started with a new piece of raw lumber and did the same thing. I jointed down one edge, took them over the table saw, and I ripped these down to 2¼ inches. So I knew I was going to need a little bit extra to work with here because of what happened with the legs. So I think I added like an extra 3/4 inch from the original designed length of these aprons. And I had to wait until I had touched the legs to the tabletop anyway to figure out exactly what that length was going to be. But again, I think I added like an extra 3/4 inch and that I would get the exact length later on. And here you go. The title says it all. Putting poly on is great. It always makes the wood look so good. You can see on this one edge that this wood was figured in some areas and it looks great. I hope it comes out on camera in a way that makes it look as good as it does in person. I did 2 coats of poly on the underside of this tabletop and I ended up doing 4 coats on the top side. I'm sanding here with 220 grit to get ready for polyurethane on the aprons and the legs. This is the top side of the tabletop, and I'm sanding here with 220 also. The legs and aprons all got 2 coats of poly as well. Okay, so each of the legs was going to be attached flush with the edges of the tabletop. So it saved me some time. These aren't going to be inset, so I didn't have to, get a combo square out and mark where all these were going to be placed. I just lined them up with the edge of the table. And then I am kind of looking to see which sides of the legs I want to face up or down, which sides I want to be facing out or in. And then I'm marking them with 1, 2, 3, 4. So I put them back in the same place. I'm also marking where I'm going to drill for pocket screws, bearing in mind where the aprons are going to be. After drilling for pocket screws, I'm just lining them up, gluing them down, putting the pocket screws in, and letting it dry. So now with these legs in place, I can get the final length for the aprons. So I'm just going to measure those and make the cuts. The aprons were inset by a 1/2 inch from the edge of the tabletop. After that, it's just a matter of pocket screws and glue. Okay, so the table's almost done. I decided to put a nice chamfer on the top edge of the tabletop and also going down the vertical length of the outside of each leg. And if anybody knows of a good method of dust collection for these smaller hand routers, please let me know. I haven't figured out anything good. Maybe there's some attachment you can get for the bottom of it that actually works, but I don't know what it is. So if anybody knows, put it in the comments, please. I'm just sanding here all the areas I just put the chamfer on and the outside faces of all the legs. And then I'll do the tabletop too. This is all with 220 grit. The legs are going to get a little bit more polyurethane. Whenever I put a coat of polyurethane on the top, I also just ran some down the outside edges of the legs, just so in case they get, kicked or bumped, they've got a little bit more protection. So before the last coat of poly on the top of this, I did sand with 600 grit. I really wanted it to be as smooth as possible. Okay, so here's the table in its final form. This came out great. It doesn't look quite as good on camera as it does in person, but Wormy Curly Maple, really cool wood, great to work with. It didn't really destroy my blades, at least that I noticed, but this thing looks great. Thanks again for coming and watching. I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch my builds. If you have any questions or anything, just let me know. Put them in the comments. I try to respond to everything. So once again, I appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time, and y'all have a good day.